Pretty impressive for someone with just a high school diploma to be thinking about voluntary retirement.
Sarah, the president's daughter, who talked to me with a smiling face. I smiled back at her just as broadly. I am number one in sales, so I think the company will lose $30 million, but I will leave the company because I am fired. Sarah didn't seem to understand what I meant. I was already prepared.
Tom, I just heard. Is it true you're resigning?
As soon as I answered the phone, our president, George, sounded panicked. Yes, my name was on the list of those opting for voluntary retirement.
That's ridiculous. It's impossible for your name to be on that list. It must be some mistake.
I knew it wasn't a mistake. I think Sarah knows very well. Maybe you should ask her.
Sarah, anyway, I'll call you back.
After hanging up with the president, I started unpacking the boxes that had been delivered to my apartment. I wondered what the president would do now, and part of me was actually looking forward to it. My name is Tom. I turned 41 last month. During my student years, I couldn't bring myself to go to school and spent my days working part-time jobs to make money. After all, I finished school with a high school diploma. But living a carefree life made me realize I couldn't go on like this forever, so I decided to get some qualifications for the future. I went to a vocational school where I successfully obtained certifications as a hazardous material handler and electrician, and eventually got a job at an industrial equipment manufacturer. After a few years of working in measurement and inspection, my achievements were recognized, and I moved into sales. Sales suited me as I had no trouble talking to people and knew our products well enough to answer questions accurately. Then, 10 years ago from now, at an event hosted by the industrial equipment manufacturer, I met George, the president of Johnson Trading. From the beginning, I felt a good rapport with George. At first, our interactions were just business, but gradually we started socializing more and going out for drinks. George, I have a nice gift for you. How about a drink today?
That sounds great. Actually, I found a great place too.
It's undeniable that there was an ulterior motive connected to work. But even putting that aside, I enjoyed going out for drinks with George.
Tom, you really are a pleasant man. A man like you is rare these days.
I'm honored to hear that from you, George. At the bar where we had drunk many times before, I poured whiskey into a glass. The glass filled with whiskey clinked with ice, shining amber.
Tom, today, I have a scouting offer for you. You excel in sales, and I think you can shine even more at my company.
Johnson Trading is a company for businesses where sales directly affect revenue. The equipment they handle ranges from facilities for automobile manufacturers to devices for semiconductor makers and microscopes for maintaining quality.
Our sales depend on performance. The more results you deliver, the more it reflects in your salary. So I think it's perfect for you. How about it? Want to take on a new challenge in life?
I was excited by George's proposal. Of course, I was satisfied with my current company, but I was also 31. If I was going to switch jobs, now was the chance. And the prospect of salary changes based on sales results was attractive. After a night of thought, I contacted George and transferred to Johnson Trading. At Johnson Trading, I continued to achieve one success after another. My experience working at the industrial equipment manufacturer made explaining inspection devices a breeze. Getting along well with corporate representatives, I was able to proactively suggest necessary items, and eventually, I gained their trust. If you ask Tom, there's nothing he can't find. Thankfully, I was regarded so at various companies, and I was soon handling contracts worth millions annually. Before I knew it, I had achieved the top sales performance. Then one day, Sarah, the president, George's daughter, joined the company.
Tom, I'd like you to meet my daughter.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you.
Sarah had just graduated from a university in this city. She was brimming with youth and had a dazzling smile. Nice to meet you, too. I'm Tom. I look forward to working with you.
Tom here is our top sales representative. You should try to learn from him, Sarah.
Wow, that's amazing. I'll do my best.
It was clear how much George doted on her, his only daughter. Seeing him so affectionate made me feel warm inside. Sarah was assigned to the HR department. However, as time passed, I began to hear not so great things about her. The senior employee she worked with said she's not useful. She only responds when spoken to and cares only about her nails and smartphone. At first, everyone just laughed it off as unavoidable. But then one day, one of the senior employees suddenly decided to resign. She was competent and always ready to answer any questions about the company. I suspect that an incident I accidentally witnessed one night might have been the cause. When I was passing by the president's office, I saw that he and Sarah were the only ones inside.
Hey, Daddy, listen. That lady boss in my department is being so mean to me. She doesn't answer my questions and deliberately gives me nasty tasks.
Is that so? You're having a tough time, Sarah. That's admirable.
Yes, I'm doing my job properly, but I think I'll get sick from the stress soon.
I thought to myself, oh come on, what are you saying? But I didn't dwell on it too much, as George is a sensible man and wouldn't take Sarah's words at face value. It was less than a month later when it happened. Rumors had it that a transfer was considered, but the senior employee couldn't accept it and ultimately chose to resign. On her last day, I happened to meet her.
Tom, thank you so much for helping me all these years.
Are you really leaving? That's sad. With tears in her eyes, she thanked me and said quietly,
Be careful with Sarah. She's not as foolish as she seems.
With those words, she left. I could never forget what she said. As the years went by, one by one, the senior members of the HR department left. In their place came newcomers the same age or younger than Sarah, and soon Sarah, who had only been there a few years, was treated like a senior. Consequently, it was inevitable that Sarah was appointed as the head of HR. Even so, I thought this would not affect my work. But Sarah's influence was closer to me than I expected. I had a junior colleague, James, who had just turned 35. Like me, James had joined midway through his career, and we spent our days making sales calls together. He was a promising asset, likely to surpass me in the future, and James, with his refreshing demeanor, was popular among clients and female colleagues alike. Although my chances to go drinking with George had decreased, I went out more often with James. When work ran late, we would drink together and encourage each other, facing the next day with renewed vigor. I heard that James and Sarah had started dating right after she became the department head. Around that time, it became my routine to listen to Sarah's story from James.
Tom, listen. I'm going on a date with Sarah. Do you know any good places? She just asked me to have lunch together from now on. She's going to make lunch for me.
I listened to James's smitten stories with a smile. If James was happy, that was enough for me. However, as days passed, I noticed something was off with him.
Sorry, Tom. Sarah says I shouldn't go to entertainment anymore. She hates it when I drink with my colleagues and come home drunk.
Another day brought another concern.
Sarah keeps saying I work too much overtime. I explain that it's just necessary work, but somehow I'm always doubted.
I couldn't hold it in any longer and confided in James. Come on, what's there to doubt?
I'm not sure myself. She suspects I might be going out drinking or getting cozy with other women.
I was so flabbergasted I couldn't even respond. I wish she could see how seriously James works just once. Just then, James' phone rang.
Oh, it's Sarah. Well, I'm heading home.
James looked worn out. I worried but knew better than to meddle in romance. A few days later, I heard rumors that Sarah and James had broken up. James took some time off work and then resigned. I deeply regretted not reaching out to him more seriously. I didn't want anything to do with Sarah, but one day, by George's orders, I had to take her to entertain a client from Company Simpson. When the president of Company Simpson visited our office previously, he seemed to take a liking to Sarah when they met by chance.
I will be with you today.
Sure, I'll handle the business talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
She was always lively and polite, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah might mess something up. We entered the restaurant to entertain the president of Company Simpson. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us today.
Good evening. This place is actually my recommendation.
I was surprised by her casual approach, but the president of Company Simpson didn't seem to mind. I decided to just observe and not interfere.
Let me pour you some wine.
Sarah filled the president's glass and we toasted. The meal was served and the conversation gradually livened up. The president seemed pleased every time Sarah praised him excessively. Maybe Sarah was cut out for sales after all, I thought, as I started my usual sales pitch.
Tom, where did you go to school?
I've been waiting for this, I think with a sly grin. I actually graduated from high school during my studies. Being asked about my educational background was my cue, and I had a staple story ready that usually piqued interest. Initially, people might feel uneasy, but once we got to the actual business talk, their anxiety seemed to dissolve, and they were often impressed by how hard I'd worked from just a high school education. However, this time, Sarah interfered.
Wow, you graduated high school. There are still people like that around today?
Well, after that, I went to a vocational school for my certifications.
What about you, President? Where did you graduate from?
Sarah directed the conversation to the president of Company Simpson, who seemed pleased.
I graduated from New York University.
Wow, that's impressive.
The conversation then continued between just Sarah and the president. I tried to steer it back to business, but any interruption from me was sure to be frowned upon. After the meal, we saw the president off. Sarah, can I talk to you for a moment? Because of you dominating the conversation today, I couldn't get to any of my business points. Think a little, will you? When it came to work, I couldn't compromise. Sarah looked dissatisfied with my remarks.
The conversation with him was going great, wasn't it? Tom, are you really the top salesman? And I just remembered, I can't believe you're just a high school grad.
Sarah laughed at me in a way that felt mocking. I felt anger rising, but I reminded myself that she was much younger than me. I had to act like the adult in the situation, so I tried to calm down. I'm not ashamed of being a high school graduate, and I actually contribute to the company. Today's meeting was not just about hospitality, but also about connecting it to business. Didn't I say I would handle the business doc? Sarah played with her hair the entire time I was speaking.
Got it. Are we done? The old man's lecture is boring, you know?
I was speechless with astonishment. Sarah quickly left and went home. 2 years later, while I was on a business trip to Thailand, the company announced voluntary retirement. Sarah contacted me to say I was a prime candidate for retirement. Without waiting to return to the US, I applied immediately, and my application was accepted. I was to retire in a week. The president, George, was also abroad on business, so it seemed Sarah handled my retirement paperwork. When I returned from the trip, Sarah came to me with a complete set of retirement paperwork.
Pretty impressive for someone with just a high school diploma to be thinking about voluntary retirement.
Sarah said to me with a grin. I responded with a broad smile. I am number 1 in sales, so I think the company will lose $30 million, but I will leave the company because I am fired. Sarah seemed not to understand what I meant. My preparations were already in place. I retired and went straight to Thailand. In fact, over the past 2 years, I had been to Thailand several times for work and coincidentally met my former junior, James, at an expat apartment. James, tanned and healthy, had regained his bright smile. We had dinner at a Thai street food stall, and I had the chance to hear his story.
After that, I really couldn't feel like going back to work. Did you hear? I broke up with Sarah.
Yeah, but I didn't expect you to quit your job.
Sorry I didn't say goodbye. I haven't had much experience with women. I got so lost. Even when I did exactly what Sarah said, I only got complaints.
While talking, James seemed to get more dejected, so I hurriedly spoke to him. Don't worry about it. The important thing is that you're doing well now. You look completely different from back then. James brightened up with a smile.
Thank you. A senior from my college picked me up, and now we're working together here.
Seeing James smile almost made me cry. We ate dinner, drank, and celebrated our reunion. That night, when I reached the airport, James picked me up and drove me to the apartment where I would start my new life. As I was about to enter the apartment, I received a call from George, the president back in US. Good evening. It's been a while.
Tom, I just heard. Did you really resign? Is that true?
As soon as I answered the phone, George sounded panicked. Yes, my name was on the list of those opting for voluntary retirement.
That's ridiculous. It's impossible for your name to be on that list. It must be some mistake.
I knew it wasn't a mistake. Sarah knows very well about it. Maybe you should ask her.
Sarah, anyway, I'll call you back.
After hanging up with George, I unpacked the luggage that had been delivered to my apartment. I wondered what he would do next, and a part of me was actually looking forward to it. The next day, George called me again.
Hello, Tom. I spoke to Sarah, but she said she didn't understand well. It was indeed just your voluntary retirement. I saw the paperwork myself, and there was no mistake.
Indeed, there was no mistake about the voluntary retirement. And as expected, Sarah probably didn't say much.
Tom, was there anything unsatisfactory? If there's anything I can solve, please tell me.
George's words stirred something within me, but I knew it was too late to change anything. I had made up my mind. I did have complaints. When you recruited me to your company, you said that hard work would be rewarded, right? That the results would reflect in compensation?
Yes, of course, that hasn't changed.
But it has changed. No matter how many contracts I secured, the profits were just used up as company expenses, and my sales figures were almost non-existent. My sales performance has been reported as poor these past few years, hasn't it? This was the truth.
I had thought your performance was dropping. I assumed you were just going through a rough patch. But expenses, you say?
You might not be aware, George. In fact, Sarah spent most of the company's expenses. I revealed, which clearly confused him. I found it odd too and started investigating. This is just my guess, but you remember the hospitality we did for president of company Simpson. Around that time, Sarah's own entertainment expenses started to increase.
Oh, yes, but that was for work, wasn't it?
I understand that taking clients out to meals is part of the job. However, for someone not in sales, her frequency of outings was too high. George fell silent. I understand if you can't believe what I'm saying, but please, check it yourself. With that, I ended the call and the day was over. As I collapsed into bed, my heart was racing. What will Sarah do now? I rolled over and looked up at the brand new ceiling. It's really too late now. I took a deep breath and resumed in packing. 3 days later, George contacted me again. This time, it wasn't over the phone, but online, so I opened my laptop and waited.
Good evening, Tom. Thanks for today. About our previous conversation, actually, I've called Sarah here. She says she has something she wants to discuss. Could you listen to her?
Even though it was just on screen, it was the first time I had seen him in a long while, and he seemed tired. And I was curious about what Sarah wanted to talk about. Yes, that's fine. Sarah appeared on the screen.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. For some reason, Sarah fell silent, but I waited patiently for her to speak. Suddenly, Sarah started shouting.
Tom, you spread lies to my dad last time, saying I was entertaining too much and wasting expenses. Why would you say such awful things? I can't believe this.
Sarah began talking all at once and eventually broke down crying over her desk. I quietly turned down the volume on my computer as she spoke. But I hadn't expected her to suddenly start accusing me.
Sarah, I'm sorry you're hurt. Tom, after our last conversation, I also asked Sarah, and then she said what you just heard.
I was dumbfounded. George seemed completely convinced by Sarah, though I wished he'd separate personal feelings from business matters. Sarah, do you remember how many times you went abroad in this year before I left? Sarah suddenly looked up, seemingly faking her tears.
About 3 times, right?
As far as I can remember, you've been there 10 times. Sarah looked at me suspiciously.
Why do you know so much? Were you targeting me or something?
Though I was frustrated, I kept my cool. You bragged about buying that outfit overseas, right? Every time you went, you'd come back with bags, shoes, and clothes. You always talked about it proudly, so everyone knew, not just me.
I heard you were taking time off, but is that true?
I did take time off, but no, it was for inspections.
Her statements were all over the place. If it was a business inspection, did you produce any plans or reports afterward? It wasn't just a fun trip, right? I haven't heard anything from the sales department. Sarah fell silent. The clothes and bags were expenses, right? George, please make sure to discuss this with the accountant.
Oh, I see. I'll do that.
Sarah's face turned red with anger. And about those fancy restaurants you use for entertainment. Entertainment is fine, but did any contracts result from those?
Tom also went to those, didn't he?
That's true, but I only use such places when absolutely necessary, depending on the client's preference. Sometimes a cafe or a diner is more appropriate. It seems Sarah was not interested in listening to what I had to say.
Why are you only blaming me? Dad, you believe in me, right?
George, suddenly thrown into the conversation, was troubled.
But, Sarah, what Tom is saying is true. He doesn't always go to the same place. He's very good at socializing and really listens to what people have to say, which is why he secures contracts.
Thank you, but that's not the issue here, Sarah. You effectively erased the revenue I brought in through contracts. Sarah, who had been loudly protesting, suddenly fell silent.
What are you talking about? That's impossible.
Her tone changed drastically, and she glared at me. I thought you would say that. I shared my screen and showed them the file I had created. I'm meticulous by nature. I record who I meet, where, and when every time. I also note the content of our conversations and their food preferences because I never know how it might connect later. It helps me understand the relationships between businesses. This document, a result of continuous effort from my previous job, could very well be called my asset. It helped me gain trust and build rapport with my clients. I've recorded every contract in detail, including what the next steps were. Based on my feel from my time in sales, falling below last year's figures was impossible.
Tom, can you send me that?
Yes, I have prepared the last year's data. I'll paste it in the chat. I attached the PDF to the chat and sent it. The document contained only the contract details, dates, and amounts, leaving out the finer personal details. Once again, I urge you to look into this thoroughly. If there's anything else, please contact me. I ended the call. Sarah didn't speak another word. I suspect they might contact me again, but until then, I'll do what I can. A week later, George wanted to talk again. I had told James about the whole situation, and he said, "Please let me join." So he secretly sat in on the call. The call, like last time, was conducted online. George and Sarah were already on the screen.
Good evening, Tom. Sorry to bother you every time, but thank you for today. First off, after reviewing the documents you sent, what you said was correct.
I was relieved to hear George acknowledge this directly.
I'm truly sorry. Look, Sarah, you apologize properly too.
I'm sorry, but hospitality is an important job, right? And it has nothing to do with Tom quitting. Tom wanted to quit, right?
What kind of apology was that? She clearly didn't think she was at fault. Yes, that's true. Look, I was even on the list of voluntary retirees. George looked at me, shocked. Had he not known about this discussion either? George, I'll also attach this in the chat. Well, I would have retired anyway. He scrutinized the screen like he was devouring the information. It seemed he had reached his limit.
You foolish girl. You've been doing this all along.
No, Dad said it. The company started recruiting for voluntary retirements because things were getting tough. And taking a high school grad to entertainments would have made our clients doubt our credibility.
Have you never listened to Tom's story? Do you know how hard he worked to get here? And how many years he has been working and achieving results after graduating?
A heated argument between father and daughter began in the background. James couldn't help but burst into laughter at the scene.
Who's that?
Hi, long time no see, George and Sarah.
Sarah noticed James and seemed startled.
James, well, it's good to see you're well. Are you with Tom right now?
Yes, I never thought I'd hear from Sarah's own mouth how important entertainment is.
I recalled how Sarah used to insist that James shouldn't entertain when they were dating.
James, can you tell me more about it?
What I heard directly from Sarah was that the people who do entertainments aren't good people. She said they misunderstand that using money to have fun is their job.
Well, that's something I couldn't help but blurt out.
That's your misunderstanding.
I kept detailed records like Tom taught me. Thanks to your objections, my records show a sharp decrease in entertainment activities.
Stop making things up.
Sarah burst into tears and buried her face in the desk. James and I were just stating facts.
Both of you, I'm truly sorry. I know it sounds self-serving, but would you consider coming back?
George begged us, but I'm not going back to that company. Prepare $1 million, no, $5 million. I have no intention of coming back, but if Sarah can arrange for $5 million, I will properly hand over my duties. George looked at me, dumbfounded.
What are you talking about? Why should we pay $5 million just for a handover?
I sent my records before, and they include new facility installations and commitments for maintenance contract renewals. That alone is worth $30 million a year. George and Sarah seemed taken aback. I've built these relationships over many years. I could only make those proposals because of that. The intricate details and future needs are something only I would know. I looked at Sarah. The expensive trips abroad you took, the luxurious meals at fancy restaurants that didn't lead to contracts, all of my $30 million was nearly wiped out by Sarah's personal expenses. The only reason we haven't lost money so far is because of my sales. George, isn't the company operating at a loss now? He remained silent and bowed his head. If expenses exceed income, of course, it turns into a loss. If it's an investment that leads to future returns, it's valuable. Let me say it again. Without my sales, it will just turn into a loss.
Jesus, you think it's my fault?
Sarah, pale-faced, looked at James and me.
This foolish girl.
George muttered, still looking down.
Dad, I'm sorry, but we can manage without paying, right?
That's impossible. In fact, today the client said they wouldn't sign unless it was with Tom. That's not all. Our new contact person has been reprimanded for not being able to communicate effectively. That's why we really needed Tom back. Sarah, can you handle this?
Sarah turned pale under George's scolding. I'm sorry, but I will not return to Johnson Trading. I am currently working in Thailand with James. If this needs to be handled formally as a business matter, I am available at any time. Please think it over.
Understood. I'll consider it.
Our call ended.
Wow, that was quite a drama.
James sighed after the call.
We really did work hard back then, didn't we?
It's easy to miss what's happening right under your nose. We laughed heartily from the depths of our bellies and spent the night drinking. The $5 million deal I proposed was later formally agreed upon. Considering the $30 million loss, paying it would be no loss at all. George made that decision. That amount was promptly paid to a consulting firm in Thailand, turning into my earnings. Although I had just arrived in Thailand, I would be returning to the US to train the employees of Johnson Rating rigorously. Of course, I intended to ensure that their investment was more than worthwhile. Sarah is no longer at the company.
I've indulged her too much because she was my only daughter.
Disowned in a manner of speaking by George, Sarah was forced to live a modest life through part-time jobs. The luxury car and designer goods she had bought were sold off to cover part of the $5 million. I heard she started living alone, but probably struggled as she had never done laundry or housework before. She targeted a wealthy marriage, immersing herself in matchmaking parties. Perhaps because she was flattered for the first time in a while, she felt like a queen until she fell for a bad man. She contributed her money to him, and after a while he abandoned her. A year later, I finished the handover tasks at Johnson Rating and returned to Thailand. James picked me up at the airport and we headed to my apartment.
Great job. So, the handover went smoothly.
Yo, I did what I could. George showed me the performance figures and it looks like they'll manage somehow. Well, just eliminating Sarah's wasteful spending was a big benefit for the company. James laughed out loud. I also pitched to clients in Thailand with factories and branches here.
That's great. I was wondering why inquiries had increased.
Oh, they were already coming in. Looks like some good connections will be made. I sighed with relief and settled back into my seat. The car sped along under the blazing sun. The lively pop music James played suited Thailand perfectly. I laughed from the bottom of my heart. The future looks as bright as the shining sun,